Lovely. So this evening I'm going to run through your insurance policy, basically, so that you know the sort of thing that you're covered for. I'm not going to go into minute detail. There isn't a huge amount of minute detail. I have to say the policy is pretty straightforward. There isn't lots and lots of small print. But I'm going to talk about the different types of cover that you have, and generally talk about the policy. Obviously, I can't comment on your individual policies because I don't know what they are. But if you do have a specific question about your policy, then you can message me or email me. And once you've got my details, which is will be one of the things that Anna sends out to you. So the things that we're going to cover. So we're going to go through the policy in a bit of detail, but not too much. Some of the common questions that we get asked, there's only 3 of them, not too complicated. The things that we need you to tell us about, so when you need to contact us, and then our risk management resources that are available for you, and what to do in the event of a claim. And then hopefully there'll be time for some Q&A at the end if you have got any general questions. For those who don't know who we are, ecclesiastical insurance was set up 134 years ago now to insure the Anglican Church. And so it was set up specifically for that purpose. Over the years, we have diversified and we insure more than the Anglican Church now. We insure lots of other faiths and lots of other denominations. And we also insure schools and heritage property, and charities. Have quite a big charity book as well. So we're that type of insurer rather than the big business insurer. We insure more churches and heritage buildings than anybody else, more grade 1 listed buildings than anybody else as well. And that means that we do actually understand the challenges that come with insuring a building that is possibly listed, but certainly will have some very specific features. We're owned by All Churches Trust Limited. We're the only financial services company to be owned by a charity. And all of our available profits go back to All Churches, who then distribute them in grants to organisations with a Christian ethos, including dioceses, cathedrals and churches. And if you haven't had a grant from All Churches Trust in the past, then why not apply for one? I'm sure that there's something that you're doing that will be worthy of some funding. They have a couple of grant schemes. They do a small grant scheme which covers projects up to $1 million. Yes, up to $1 million, sorry. And then a larger grants project for those that are over that. About 90% of grant applications for the small grant scheme get some funding. It won't give you the whole funding, but it will often be the seed funding that you need to get other funders interested. So if you have got a project on the go, then do think about a grant from them. The other thing that they do grants for is roof alarms, and theft of metal remains a big challenge for us as insurers, but also for you as churches too. And having a roof alarm is the most effective way of preventing a loss. And the roof alarm grants are available for up to £2,500 or 50% of the cost of an alarm. We have a specialist church team, but mostly based in Gloucester, and they consist of the underwriters, who are the people that you would talk to on a day-to-day basis if you've got a policy query. The surveyors, who are the ones that come out to do the valuation on your church buildings and undertake a risk management survey at the same time. We have some specialist risk management consultants who are our technical specialists on all things risk management. So we have one that specialises in fire, and one that specialises in health and safety. And all of our documents and things that are on the website have been done in conjunction with people like the health and safety executive, so that we know that they are all that you would need in order to show that you had done what was reasonable in the event of an investigation or an incident. We have a specialist claims team as well, who deal with nothing but church claims, and so they also understand the intricacies that come with our buildings, our church buildings. And then we have a team of church insurance consultants, and that's who I am. And this is me. I'm the local kick for the southwest, and I look after 5 dioceses: Truro, Exeter, Bath and Wells, Bristol, and Salisbury. I live in the diocese of Truro, but I'm very well versed with the A30 and coming up to see everybody. So I am available to come and visit you if you should need me to. My background is in risk management and insurance. That's what I've done for my whole career, with the exception of a year. I've worked in a variety of different organisations: public sector, police, retail, ASDA. It's quite a broad experience, but I am also very bedded in parish life. I've been a Christian for about 25 years, and a bit more than that, but I'm not going to admit to that because I just remembered how old my son is. So I've been Christian for that long. I spent a year after I'd left Asda. I spent a year doing buildings for mission for Leeds Diocese, where I was looking at how we were using our church buildings to do God's mission and how we might do that a bit more creatively in some cases. I have been a church warden and a treasurer, and so I know that the joys and pains that come with both of those roles, and I know how much time they can take. One of the reasons why we do this training is to equip you so that it's not such a burden as it can seem sometimes. I'm a licensed reader, as you can see from my picture, and I do sit on a PCC at the moment, and Deanery Synod as well. My background meant that this job was absolutely perfect for me because it married lots of years of experience, professional experience, with my passion for God and the church. It's your job to do God's mission. It's my job to be there to support you and help you in doing that in whatever way I can, because insurance is actually an enabler. It's there as a backstop for when things go wrong, and that enables you to take those risks and get on with doing God's mission. Some of the ways that I can help, I can deliver training such as this. I deliver training on health and safety, on keeping your church open, on doing fire risk assessments, some fundraising bits and pieces as well. So those are just some of the subjects that I can help you with, and I can do that at parish level or at a deanery level or benefice level, whatever suits, and we can do stuff online as well as face to face. But I can also be there to attend meetings if needed. One of the talks that I do on open churches, lots of people say afterwards, that was really good, but when I take this back to the PCC, they're not actually going to believe that you said that we can leave the church open without anybody in it. So sometimes they need it to come from the horse's mouth. I'm the horse in those circumstances, so I'm there for you. Now on to your insurance policy. About 95% of our policy holders are on this policy, so this is the one that most of you are likely to be on. And this policy was introduced in 2016 in response to some feedback that we've had from customers. One of the advantages of the policy is that all of your parish buildings can be insured under the one policy. You don't need lots of different policies. And we are trying to combine as many as we can at the moment, where there's a clear connection on the policy, we can put them together. But if there's been some pastoral reorganisation and we don't know that parishes have merged, then we can't. So we actually just need you to tell us about that. The policy comes with a rate stability guarantee. This basically means that we won't increase the rates for the period of that agreement, which is 3 years, even if you make a claim. So you've got it's not a guaranteed premium, because there will be other impacts that might affect it, like inflation, and the cost of your building goes up. But the actual rate that we use will be the same, so it's going to be very similar from year to year for those 3 years. It covers buildings and contents up to a loss limit. This is a bit like your house insurance. You don't actually tell your house insurer that you want £200,000 worth of cover. You tell them that you've got a 3-bed detached house or whatever it is, and they have that they give a sum attached to it. And ours is very similar to that. The loss limit is set at a level above the valuation and your actual sum insured, and it's there just as a buffer in case there's some changes to legislation, for example, if you needed to make it more accessible, or so on, or there was a significant increase because there was a shortage in craftsmen, so the cost went up significantly at the particular time that you needed it. It covers those sorts of things, but your premium is based on the actual valuation that the surveyor has done and undertaken. The buildings also includes boundary walls and fences, lich gates and outbuildings. So it's not just the church building or the church hall building, but if you've got a shed, you know, a garage, a more permanent structure than a wooden shed, then you know all of those buildings are included. The basis of the settlement is that it's a sympathetic repair in keeping with the existing structure. Now, if you had a really major loss and wanted to do something completely different, then that would be absolutely possible. But most claims are for bits of the building rather than the whole building. So it's whatever will match and is right to go into that existing structure. So we won't tell you to put ordinary plaster on the walls or anything like that. It needs to be a lime solution, all of that sort of thing. We will either do an economic repair. If that's not possible, then we will give you a modern equivalent replacement. And so that means that for something like your chalice, if it's silver of a certain weight, then what you will get back is silver of a certain weight. If there's any antiquity value in it, then that isn't covered, although that is an optional extra if you so wish. But it's repair or replacement with a modern equivalent. We're not going to buy a really ancient chalice for you, I'm afraid. You have 75% of our policyholders have unlimited theft of metal cover under their policy. And there is a condition for all theft of metal claims, and no matter whether it's unlimited or it's a set limit, and that you must have smart water applied to your external metal, that the smart water must be registered, and that you must have warning signs displayed. And there's no payment for any claims for theft of metal if those 3 conditions haven't been met. If you don't have unlimited theft of metal cover because you're in a high risk area, you've had lots of previous losses, and you have a very significant amount of lead on your roof, then you can only have unlimited cover if you have an approved roof alarm. So that's something to bear in mind. And also, irrespective of whether you've got unlimited cover or not, there is no cover when scaffolding is erected, when you'll have, for example, if you're having building works done. Now, it can be arranged, but the default position is no cover. But if you alarm scaffolding and if you have hoarding on it, then it is possible to actually have some cover. But it's very important that you tell us if you are having building works done so that we can advise you on the correct way to go. So that loss and damage to buildings that we were just talking about, the actual cover that you have is for any physical loss or damage to the building or contents. So that covers things like your fire, theft, malicious damage, impact, storm, burst pipes, or accidental damage is the one that we try and sweep it under if we can't attach it to any of the other sections. But it's basically that any loss or damage from an insured event. There are some key extensions under the policy, including things like communion plate, which is also insured anywhere in the UK for up to £30,000. So if you can't keep it in church and it has to be kept somewhere else, then you are covered. You are covered for that. Contract works insurance is what you have when you are having building works done, and it's the type of contract the type of cover that you have depends on the type of contract that you've entered into for it. But you have contract works cover for up to £150,000. Now that includes that and fees, so it might not be as big as it looks in terms of a figure. But if the works plus that and fees are over £150,000, then we just arrange a separate policy for you for those works. And how we do that depends on which form of contract the work's being done under. But again, if you're having building works done, there's a questionnaire that we need you to complete so that we can advise on the best way forward for that particular cover. Fly tipping was an extension that we brought in a few years ago because we did have a lot of churches that were suffering from having people just dumping things in churchyards. And so there is cover for removal costs of up to £2,500 a year under the policy. Archaeological costs is another extension as well, and this is if you have a loss, which means that you need to dig at all, then you'll need an archaeological survey in case there's any if there's been burials in around the church, then you'll need an archaeological survey to check that there's nothing that's being disturbed there. So that's covered as well. The policy has a standard £250 excess, but some churches do choose to have a higher excess than that, the excess being the first amount that you pay of any claim. But the standard is £250. And we don't cover subsidence. Not many churches have foundations, so it can't really cover the subsidence risk. And we don't include terrorism automatically, but it tends to be only the really big cities, London, Manchester, Birmingham, that the churches in those areas that tend to take out the terrorism cover. It's fairly low risk for the rest of the country, or it has been in the past. So your property damage, that's the first bit that covers. The next section is loss of income. And this covers if you can't use the building and you normally hire it out, it would cover any loss of income that you have from lettings and so on. But it would also cover any costs that you incur in having to hire somewhere else. So if you need to hire at the local school on a Sunday to hold your services in, then it would cover those costs. It also covers cancellation of church events anywhere in the UK, so not just on church premises, but if you need to cancel an event because of fire, lightning, storm, and so on, those things that you're actually insured for, the insured perils, then there's up to £1,000 worth of cover from that. And that would also include if you so if you were having an outdoor concert in the churchyard, and it had to be cancelled because of a hurricane that wiped everything out, and you'd hired equipment that you needed to pay for, then it would cover those cancellation costs as well, those costs that you'd incurred. And you have £100,000 worth of cover over a period of up to 4 years for that. So it can sometimes take that long for a church to be rebuilt. So that's why you've got the 4 years on there. You have cover for money, and this is cash. Essentially, this is the cash money. And you have a £5,000 limit on that of cash, either while it's being counted at somebody's home or in transit to the bank. And you have that if it's kept in a locked safe as well, and you have that much in cash. Otherwise, it's £500. So, for example, if you've got money in an alms box or whatever, you have up to £500 worth of cover there. And if you have fundraising events, then cover is doubled from 2 days before, sorry, 2 days before the event and up to 7 days afterwards. Theft by officials. Now, we all like to think that people who are in churches are always above and beyond reproach, but that's not always the case, unfortunately. We get at least one claim a year where we discover that, or church discovers that somebody's run off with some money, and that's what the theft by officials cover covers. And an official is anybody who you have given responsibility for any money to, so that could be the person who does the banking or the treasurer or anybody who's got an online access to the accounts. But you only have £10,000 worth of cover, and you might think that £10,000 is a lot, but not many of the claims that we've had in are below £10,000. A lot of them are above, and it's often something that's been, it's small amounts over a long period of time that get taken. And it's one of the reasons why having good governance around your accounts is really, really crucial. You are expected to comply with diocesan policy and guidance and Church of England policy and guidance on these matters, which includes things like there need to be 2 people counting. It should be counted before it leaves the church. If you've got online banking, then you need to have at least 2 people authorising it, and so on. So that good governance, good practice, and some of which is diocesan policy as well, you are expected to have in place. The next section under your policy is the liabilities cover. Now, liability policies cover the PCC's legal responsibility towards others. And you will have responsibilities towards others because you operate a building and because you are providing pastoral care. So there's lots of different ways that you owe a duty to people, and if you breach that duty, if you fail to do what an ordinary person on the Clapham omnibus, as it was in my day when I started training, but the man on the Clapham omnibus, if you don't do what a reasonable person would do in similar circumstances, then you are negligent. And if you've been negligent, then somebody can claim damages against you. So you have £10 million worth of cover for employers' liability, and that covers not just employees that you might have, but also volunteers. Volunteers are classed as employees because you owe the same duty to them under legislation. So they're classed as employers. And then 10 million for public liability. And public is basically anybody who isn't an employee or a volunteer. So that will include members of your congregation, any visitors to the premises, contractors that come to the premises to do work. It includes all of those different people. You also have a £250,000 limit for pastoral care indemnity, church council and trustee indemnity, and errors and omissions covers. So those covers, employers and public liability cover you for any loss, damage or injury that you cause to somebody else. The pastoral care, church council and errors and omissions policies cover you for if you cause financial loss to somebody else as a result of your actions. So the pastoral care bit is about unstructured pastoral care. It's not about formal counselling or anything like that. But if somebody then suffers a financial loss as a result of you giving that care to them, then they could make a claim from you. People could claim against the PCC if they felt, for example, that you hadn't conducted yourselves properly, and as a result the church had lost some money. So if you'd gambled some money, gambling is probably not a very good example, but if you'd perhaps if you'd awarded a contract, or somebody had had a connection with somebody that had been awarded a contract and it hadn't been disclosed, then somebody might actually want to make a fuss about that. That's the sort of thing that would cover. And errors and omissions covers things like not getting the right licenses for copyright. That's actually, we do get claims in for breach of copyright fairly regularly. We do manage to defend them. And we had one in not that long ago, which was a poem had been used in a sermon and in a parish magazine and on a church website. The three churches had a claim in for £20,000 from the author of the poem for breach of copyright. But as I say, we did defend it successfully for a number of reasons, but that's one of the things that's covered under errors and omissions. It would also cover things like if you accidentally booked 2 weddings in on the same day at the same time, and somebody then incurred a financial loss in having to rearrange the reception and so on. And I've also had seen claims in before from a church warden had given away the incorrect burial site in a churchyard. Not that it's a church warden's job, but in this particular case, that is what happened. And so when there was supposed to be a husband and wife buried side by side, when the wife died, somebody had already been buried next to her husband, and so we had to exhume and then dig deeper so that they could actually be in the same grave together. But those are the examples of errors and omissions types of things that we get in. Legal expenses is another section of your policy. And this is provided by DAS, who have a specialist team who do understand ecclesiastical law as well as civil and criminal law as well. And you can get advice and guidance and make claims, or help them to help you make a claim for all sorts of things, including property protection. So if somebody's parking on church land that shouldn't be, then they will take that up and get that sorted for you. Personal injury, if somebody is injured on church business and you want to make a claim against whoever's caused that injury, then they will deal with that as well. It also covers legal defence in criminal cases. So if there's a safeguarding allegation, then it provides a criminal defence for that. Any employment disputes that you might have if you have paid employees. Contract disputes as well. So if you've got a contractor that hasn't paid you if they owe you money, or hasn't delivered goods and services as described, then again, all of those things are the things that come under the legal expenses section of the policy. And you also have personal accident section of the policy too. Now, personal accident is no fault compensation. The liability cover that we talked about, if somebody makes a claim, they've got to prove that you were negligent, that somebody was at fault for it. The personal accident section of the policy is for the money doesn't go directly to the individual, it goes to the PCC, and the PCC can choose what to do with it, but it is on no fault basis. So if somebody is injured doing church work, for example, your flower arranger falls off a ladder, breaks their hip, then providing they're under the age of 80, then the PCC would be entitled to a sum of money that it could then use for whatever purpose it wanted. Most churches use it for providing that sum to the individual who's been injured. So if they needed taxis to get around, it would pay for their taxes. It's not a huge sum. It's £50 a week for temporary disablement, temporary partial disablement, and £100 a week for temporary total disablement if somebody can't do anything at all. One of the questions I always get asked on this is, why is there an age limit of 80? And does that mean that people aged over 80 are not insured? People aged over 80 are insured. They're insured under the liability section of the policy, so there's no age limit on liability. So if you've been negligent and have caused somebody to be injured, then it doesn't matter what age they are, they can still make a claim. The personal accident cover is, because it's a no fault compensation, it's underwritten in the same way that your car insurer charges a higher premium for under 21-year-olds, and doesn't provide cover for drivers aged 100 plus. There is a cut-off in terms of what people can actually insure, and this is just one of them. You might also ask why it says aged between 3 and 80 on there, because it doesn't just cover your volunteers and employees who are working on church business. It also covers church activities. So if it's an organised church activity, so if you go on a pilgrimage, for example, or you have a youth group that you take out for a trip, or a mums and tots group that goes for a walk down in the park, or so on. So those sorts of church organised activities, it covers everybody who is on that activity while they're doing that activity as well. Just a couple more bits on the actual policy. So who's actually covered? The policy is in the name of the vicar, incumbent, or rector, depending on, or priest in charge, or whatever the term is for your particular benefice, the church wardens, and the PCC for the time being. So all three bodies are insured individually and together. So if the vicar was off with stress and wanted to sue the PCC for stress, I'm not that I'm suggesting that sort of thing happens, but I'm just trying to think of an example that would make sense. Then that would still be paid under the policy if there was a claim there, even though both parties are the insured, because you're just making a claim against one of those parties. So they're together and separate in terms of being claims being made against them. It also means that, you know, sometimes when people bring a claim, they will bring it against a named individual, and so that's PCC for the time being, or sometimes they bring it against the vicar when actually it should be that it's the PCC that it should be against. So this just means that everybody is covered who's involved in the leadership of the church. You have an insuring, if you've it's for the vicars, so this basically just means that it covers you for your activities as the vicar of that parish or that benefice. If you have additional roles, so if, for example, you're a rural dean as well, then your insurance for those activities is covered by the diocese rather than by the parish. The insuring clause is basically the bit that says you will give us some money, and in return we will cover you for these things. So what we're covering you for is against loss, damage, injury, or liability that occurs or arises in connection with your usual activities. What's a usual activity, I hear you say? A usual activity is something that you do day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, year in, every 5 years in. But the things that you do, the things that are your clear activities, so your services, your trips, your Christmas fair and your summer fair, all of those are your usual activities. Taking the youth group out, that's a usual activity. So anything that you do on a regular basis, and you don't need to tell us about those activities. You know, we just accept that you do all, and you all do a variety of different things. You don't all do the same thing, but we do understand that. There are some things that you do need to tell us about, though, and not because we're going to say no, you can't do them, but because we've probably come across it before, and we can give you some advice and guidance on how to do it in the safest and easiest way. I'll talk a bit more about that on a later slide as well. Sometimes you can have people in church that like to go off and do their own thing without coming to the PCC first. One of the good ways of shutting that down, if you need to shut it down, is by pointing out that if the PCC have not agreed the activity, then it's not insured because it's not one of your usual activities. Now, in some dioceses, and I don't know if Bristol is one, but there's an expectation that the activities that the church agrees to do will be authorised by the PCC. And some of those activities you do year in, year out, year in, year out. So the easiest way of doing that authorisation is at the APCM, when you just receive the reports of everything you've done for the last year, and you just ask, is everybody happy that we carry on doing those activities for the coming year? And that's a yes, and then it's an agreed authorised church activity. We don't have too many where we have people running off doing their own thing, but we have been asked on a number of occasions, so it's not uncommon. We also have some policy conditions in the policy. So these are things that you must do, you must comply with in order for the policy to operate. And the first of those is maintaining the premises, works, machinery and plant in sound condition. So this is basically having a maintenance plan in place. You know what you're doing when you're doing it. And you undertake repairs as and when they need to be undertaken. One of the reasons for this is that if you didn't, if you neglected, for example, to maintain the roof, and in a storm was the final straw, you know, it needed replacing, and the storm just lifted it off at the last, we're not going to buy you a whole new brand new roof because it wasn't in a good state to start with. So you do need to be maintaining your property if you want the claims to be paid. And it might not be that a claim would be refused, but it might be reduced to take into account the existing level of damage that's already there. The second condition is to take all reasonable precautions to prevent damage, accident, illness and disease. And reasonable precautions is basically, it's doing that what the man on the Clapham omnibus would do, what a reasonable person would do in like circumstances. So you wouldn't go out, leave your front door open and your diamond jewellery on the dining room table. In the same way, even though we are very happy for you to have your churches open during daylight hours unattended, we would ask that you put the silver away. So it's just taking care of things in the same way that you would as if it was your own property. It means things like not leaving out obvious trip hazards for people to trip over. It's doing the things that a reasonable person would do. And then you have to exercise reasonable care in seeing that all statutory and other obligations and regulations are complied with. So this means things like following national and diocesan policy and requirements for finance on safeguarding. You know, you are making sure that all the people that you have in church are recruited under the safer recruitment procedures and so on. Those are expectations that you have those done. It also means doing other things like having your fixed electrical inspection done every 5 years, having your lightning conductor inspected at least every 4 years, and those sorts of things, having your portable appliances tested as needed. There is no statutory limit for that. And it also means undertaking risk assessments where you actually need to undertake risk assessments, but we're not going to talk about all of that tonight because that's a whole other subject that comes under the health and safety bit. But just being aware that you do need to comply with the rules is a good place to start. So some of the common questions that we get on travel, do you cover us if we go on a trip abroad, or if we're going on a trip in this country? Well, yes, if you're going on a trip in this country and it's an organised church trip, you have the personal accident cover and your liabilities will be covered too. So yeah, that's absolutely fine. If you're going abroad, then we can cover some limited elements of a trip. So again, your liabilities while you're undertaking church business abroad, those would be covered. But you do need personal travel insurance for the bits that aren't directly work related or church work related while you're over there. Cybercrime has been it's actually been quite a common question that we've had over the last year as more and more stuff has gone online. You know, do churches need to have cyber cover? This can, but it's not covered under your existing policy, but it can be arranged, but it can only be arranged if it's PCC owned machines and with PCC and parish email addresses, which isn't the case in most churches. Most churches rely on the treasurer or whoever having their own computer. So we can cover anything that belongs to the parish and that's got parish firewalls and everything else in, but we can't do it if it's an individual's computer. And hiring of church premises is a really common question here. So your policy only covers your liabilities for when you hire the premises out, and your liabilities would be restricted to things that were wrong with the building. So if somebody damaged their jacket on a nail that was sticking out of the wall, that would be covered under your policy. That's a liability claim under your policy. But if anybody was injured as a result of the activity that was taking place, then the person organising the activity needs to have their own insurance. That's not covered under the church insurance. So if you've got people like scouts and guides, then you can't be responsible for their activities because you've got no control over them. So they have to have their own. And the same is for individuals who have social events like parties. They should have cover under their house insurance. It's a standard part of house insurance policies, contents and buildings, contents or buildings, it doesn't matter which. There'll be liability cover under that. But in some, not everybody has house insurance. So where people don't have it, and if you're in a deprived area, the likelihood is that most people won't have it. Then you can actually cover their liabilities under your policy up to 3 times a year for each person who wants to hire. Things that you need to tell us about, things when you need to contact us. When you're having building works carried out, as I mentioned earlier, there's limited cover under your policy, £150,000 worth of cover, but also we have that whole thing with scaffolding and making sure that you've got as much protection as you possibly can have. So let us know if you're carrying out any building works at all. Large-scale events and higher risk activities. So these large events are things like fireworks displays where you might have 1,000 people coming to it. That's what we would class as a large scale event. And higher risk activities would be things like running a food bank or a night shelter. Those are higher risk activities. But also if you're doing things like having a bouncy castle, please don't have bouncy castles. They are inherently dangerous. People get very severely injured on them, and we really don't like them at all. If you need to use a bouncy castle, then use the services of a contractor who has their own insurance, just in case anything goes wrong. Abseiling from the tower would be another thing that you'd need to let us know about. And if you are going to abseil from the tower, please don't use the ropes that you found in the crypt. Please again use a professional company to do that for you. It's not so that we can say no to these things or that we're going to want to charge you an additional premium for it. That's not the case. It's just because we've done this for a lot of years, and we've developed guidance to help you do it in the safest way, and we want to make sure that that you have all of that available to you. Let us know if you're closing a building as well. Buildings that are not open for public worship are an arsonist's dream, or thieves and whatever as well. But arson is the biggest risk for a closed building, and there are some restrictions on the cover, and some conditions that you have to meet for cover to remain in place. So so let us know if you're thinking, if it's closed temporarily while you're making a decision, then that's okay. But once the decision is made, then you need to tell us as soon as possible. Tell us about any accidents where somebody has needed medical attention. Somebody that's needed medical attention is more likely to want to make a claim. And if we can investigate an incident very quickly after it's happened, then we're in a much better position when a claim does come in. People have 3 years in which to make a claim, or up until the 21st birthday if they're a minor. Quite often solicitors won't put a claim in until the very last minute, just before the limitation is about to expire, and that can be several years after the event, and memories have faded. People can't remember exactly what happened. So so if you let us know if somebody's needed medical attention, then we can investigate it as if it was going to be a claim, and then we'll know whether we need to defend it or accept liability as quickly as possible when a claim does come in. Also, let us know about any changes to your parish name. As I mentioned at the beginning, you can have all of your buildings under one policy. In the old days, you used to have one policy for each building, so the policies were in the name of individual buildings, and so it would be St Mary's Church, or rather than the parish of X. So let us know. Check your policy and make sure it's got your legal parish name on it. And if it hasn't, let us know. Also, let us know if you're thinking of setting up a joint council, and this is a new joint council under the legislation that came into effect on the 1st of January 2020. And this enables connected parishes to set up a joint council, and you can pass liabilities and assets up to them to manage. If you do that and you pass the buildings up, then we need to issue a policy in the name of the joint council. And again, you'd only need one policy for the joint council then. So if you're a benefice, it's a way of bringing all of that together, which is administratively easier if nothing else. And also let us know if you change the correspondent on the policy. The correspondent is the person who we send everything to. So if you change them and don't let us know, then the wrong person is going to be getting documentation and newsletters and everything else. So let us know if you change the correspondent. Normally in a session, I'd get you all discussing a couple of questions. I'm not going to do that now, you'll be pleased to know, but they will be in the slide pack that will be sent to you, and you might actually want to have a think about these, and then if you don't know the answers to them, if you're struggling to work out what the answer is, then do come back to me, and we can have a discussion about it. So there's one there about an open gardens event by parishioners, and then another one about letting out the premises and the things that you need to think about and have in place when you're letting out the premises. So it's quite often a good one to do with PCC and see if they actually have any idea what it is that they're supposed to be doing. On to risk management. Churches, there are lots and lots of different hazards in churches, and if you worried about all of them, then it would be very sad. There are a few things that we ask you to keep an eye out for, and outside, I'll start outside. Consider trees. We've had a couple of claims recently for very significant injuries to people from where trees have collapsed and fallen on them. And we've had claims in the past where trees have collapsed and people have died. So do check the trees. They need checking regularly to make sure that they are not diseased, and so on. And you should keep a record of the inspection regime that you have for that. The same applies to monuments and gravestones. They also need regular checking, topple testing, you know, a push to see if they're moving and so on, because they can collapse onto people as well. And recently we've had a number of claims in for where boundary walls have collapsed, and generally from a lack of maintenance or that there's been some extreme weather. So they also need an inspection regime. If it's the council, if it's a closed churchyard and it's the council's responsibility, then that you need to just be asking them to confirm that they have done the testing and that they've got an inspection regime in place for that. But otherwise, you need to do it. But for us as an insurer, the things that you have more control over and can do something about are slips and trips and working at height. Those are the two most significant injury types of claims that we get in. So those are the things that we ask you to concentrate on. And from a buildings perspective, then fire doesn't happen very often, but is very significant when it does happen. But most of our claims actually come from accidental damage. That's the biggest claim category for numbers across the whole church portfolio. And you know, things do get damaged accidentally, so you know, there's not a lot that you can really do about that. There are some things that you can do about fire. And having your inspections done is one of those things. The website has I think it's something like 140 different pieces of guidance on it for church. There are guidance notes on all sorts of things, so fire, security, health and safety, all of that. There's different sections, and then lots of different elements to each of those sections, particularly the health and safety toolkit, which has been devised for churches. That is really good. So guidance notes have details, lots of detail in, but there's general advice as well. There's a number of self-assessment tools on there. There's health and safety assessment tool and a theft of metal one that you can use to see what you need to do, and also health and safety, general health and safety self-assessment as well. There are a number of different videos and animations that will help guide you through how you need to do some things, and there are templates on there for your health and safety policy, for your general premises risk assessment, which you should have, and for your fire risk assessment, which aside from COVID is the one risk assessment that every single church building must have by law, and there is no excuses. So that legislation has been in for 15 years. So if you do not have a specific fire risk assessment and you get inspected, then you are likely to be fined, and fines are not covered under your insurance policy, unfortunately. So do check that, make sure that you have that one in place. The website also has approved suppliers lists on for alarms and things like that. And also our risk advice line. If you need technical advice on a matter, and I can't help, I mean, I can help with lots of things, but I don't know everything at all, then the technical specialists on the risk advice line will be the ones that will be able to answer your query. The health and safety toolkit I mentioned, there is lots and lots of health and safety information on here. We've made it as simple as we possibly can, in conjunction with the HSE, so it covers what it needs to, and I really would recommend these as a resource to you, but I'd also recommend coming to a health and safety session. It's an afternoon session, but it takes you through all the bits that you need to know, and I think it's quite an important one. Testing, I've mentioned testing a couple of times. Also on the website there is a testing schedule for you, that reminds you of how frequently you need to have things tested. You can download a thing where you can fill the dates in for the dates that it's been done, but it also gives links, direct links to the bits of guidance that you need to read in relation to each of those things. And there is also a risk calendar on the website as well, and we developed this just to help spread out the things that you need to be thinking about year in, year out, over the course of the year. So each month it suggests looking at a particular aspect of your building or your activities, and then it gives you advice and guidance on the things that you actually need to do on those as well. There is a feature in each of our monthly newsletters, e-newsletters, on the thing that you need to be doing for that month as well. And if you're not already signed up to our e-news, then do go onto the website and sign up for it, or when you get the slides you can follow the link in the slides as well. Just a quick note on claims. So electrical fires are the most common risk of fire claims. It's not arson. The most common is an electrical fault. So it is really important to have your portable electrical appliances tested on a regular basis, and to stop using equipment that is faulty or giving cause for concern. I have been in churches where I've looked at the kettle and thought, well, you wouldn't want to switch that on because there's wires poking out of it. One of my colleagues was in a church and leant against the dishwasher in the kitchen and said, oh, this dishwasher's a bit hot, and they said, oh yeah, we noticed that a few weeks ago, but they hadn't even switched it off. It wasn't actually being used, but it was still hot, so there was clearly a fault with it. So if you do get things like that, then please do get them checked out, because a church fire is absolutely devastating for the whole community, particularly for the vicar and the congregation. So do keep up with your checks as needed. And I mentioned that slips, trips and falls are the most common cause of of injuries in churches. You're not expected, they are heritage buildings, they're not expected to be perfect, but the obvious hazards you do need to look at and think about how you can best control those. Our claims team, we have a 24-hour reporting line for claims, so do report as soon as you can when something has happened, and also report it even if there's been a delay. I had my old church, when I lived up north, phoned me a couple of months ago and said, oh, you know that damp patch on the ceiling, well, we finally had it looked at, and this is what it is. And I think that damp patch had been there for about 3 or 4 years, and I've been here too, so it was a while ago. And they wanted to know if they could still make a claim, and so they spoke to the claims department, and they have allowed them to continue to make the claim, because it hasn't been made worse by the delay. What was causing it was internal. It wasn't something that the delay had made a significant impact on. So do report it even if there has been a delay, and they will do their best. They will do their best to pay your claim. And also, if you're not sure whether it is a claim or not, also speak to the claims team. They will, on a without prejudice basis, they will give you advice and say, yes, you could claim for this, but it might not be worth it, or that's definitely not covered, and things, and it saves you having to do the guesswork, and just phone them up and ask them. And by making an inquiry about something, it's not going to affect your claim or the cover or your premium or anything else. So don't be afraid to ask. And this slide has just got contact details on it, and you'll get this when I send the slides out. You don't need to write any of this down now.